I wanted to comment on Crypto Spartacus talking about the suppression of psychedelics. If you think about what psychedelics really are, particularly mushrooms, but also the later generations, they're kind of like steroids for the brain. If a living organism can evolve by eating mushrooms and get smarter and brainier as a consequence of the way that the mycelia work, the way that they send signals between each other, and the neurons can grow and the brain can grow as a consequence of that, then organisms get very, very smart very quickly. The problem a little bit, when you form concepts, what you're actually doing is putting you're putting data in formation. You're creating little circuits, and you run an electrical current across that circuit in a particular pattern. And that pattern is in formation. The degree at which you can put data in more and more complex formations, the better you can compress those circuits so that you use a small amount of electrical current to stimulate the pattern. So what psychedelics do in some sense is they connect all of the neurons in the brain to all of the other ones. So instead of having these like really delicate informational structures that are very unique and have discrete architectures, if you connect every neuron to every other neuron simultaneously, then everything means everything else, which is not very helpful. Okay, it's a steroid effect, right? Because the whole brain starts to understand itself. But the problem is that it then understands everything as everything else, right? So the analogy would be like you open a thesaurus to look up a word or to look up what kind of word is related to other words. And you see under the list of related words, all the other words in the thesaurus. Well, that's not very helpful. You've got a species that's evolving in tandem with finding mushrooms and stuff like that, using the mushrooms to grow their brains over thousands of years. The powers that be don't make them illegal. Don't make it illegal to use because they don't want the populace to evolve and be smarter. The powers that be tend to repress that move towards the neurons connecting to all the other neurons because it's not helpful. Because if everything means everything else, then you can't get anything done. So you imagine having a population that's just zoned out on mushrooms all the time or psychedelics all the time. They would just be useless. They'd be perfect spiritual beings that were incapable of doing anything. You certainly want to stop the population, generally speaking, from getting drunk on that. So any of the supply issue means that you kind of keep them all to yourself. You make them illegal to use. And then you're only allowed to take them if you've reached a certain level of discipline. And that discipline might be, the top of the Roman legionnaires' army or whatever it is, or, there might be some esoteric schools in which you are considered to be like safe to take these things, right? But actually, the only real test for initiation is, are you prepared to take them yourself, right? Because there's a lot of people that aren't. They're like, oh, well, I don't want esoteric knowledge. I can live without it, thanks. And so there's only a certain amount of people that will actually take them because they will disrupt the thinking of so many people. It's self-selecting. The people that want to open their minds to it will do so. With Bitcoin, what was quite interesting was when it first arrived, really the first major use of it was as a delivery layer for psychedelics, right? So
Silk Road.
Silk Road. What people wanted was a censorship-resistant financial network, and it turned out that what they really wanted to do was sell a lot of drugs. Now, if you think about the planet as an organism, right, a living brain, and it's very sick. And a lot of areas in the planet, a lot of neurons who are living around in different places on the planet, human beings, are sick, and they want to get a hypodermic delivery of psychedelics to them through the mail, from anywhere in the world, and by the way, any kind of psychedelics they like. Now, Bitcoin opened up that market massively. What happens is the payload is delivered to the subject. The subject receives a massive dose of esoteric knowledge, essentially, from these psychedelics. They open up the Akashic records. They look at all of the shit that's in their brain, right? Because all of the neurons are connecting to all of the other neurons simultaneously. So their thesaurus is somewhat useless, but it's also amazingly expansive in terms of their capacity to synthesize knowledge, right? And condense and optimize algorithms so that they can understand bigger concepts with smaller amount of energy. The primary reasons why BTC is so has such a high price, because people have put such a high value on that use case. If they value that particular use case, they're going to value the culture that protects that use case, which in this case is the culture surrounding BTC. The network that they've created just has a very low bandwidth. It has very low capacity for delivering data. So they've limited the transactions per second so they can have, quote unquote, a censorship-resistant network, so that they can protect this delivery network, this hypodermic psychedelic delivery network. In part, I'm not saying that's the only reason. When people talk about wanting censorship resistance, a lot of those people are people that want access to psychedelics. And the reason they want access to psychedelics is because it gets rid of all of that censorship in their brain, connects everything to everything else, so they can see the light, metaphorically, and they can understand concepts and esoteric knowledge and things that they think have been hidden from them. And they may have been hidden from them deliberately, or they may just be a consequence of ignorance, or it may just be a consequence of cultural ignorance. Who knows? But anyway, censorship resistance is the point from a psychological point of view. They want to know what they know. They don't know what they know necessarily unless they get access to psychedelic drugs. BSV actually is Bitcoin rather, is a network for trading data. Think about the network, the public network, is just like the brain is, a network of nodes connecting data to other data, information to other information. Now, what you want is a network which continuously scales, accounts for more and more information, where the cost of trading the information goes down and down and down as more information joins up, is encompassed by the network. And as the cost of trading information comes down, you get actually the psychedelic effect. More nodes have more access to more information at a lower cost, and the whole system gets healthier. It gets more connected, and you get a compression of the available information into smaller and smaller units that are more economical to run. They're more economical circuits. So you get a smarter planet with Bitcoin at scale, with all of the things in the economy accounted for, and people trading lots and lots of data. You get an ultra-efficient, ultra-healthy organism where knowledge can be distributed to places where it needs to be distributed to at a very low cost in order for those places to get healthier as a consequence of having better knowledge. At the moment, what we've got is a kind of plague of ignorance. On the internet, there's lots and lots of shit that isn't true. Nobody knows what's going on. Everybody's in a state of constant information war. Everybody's being psyoped. They're fighting against each other. Really, it's like a bunch of people walking around in a dark room with blindfolds on, bashing each other over the head. It's a coordination problem. We all need to live in the world together. We need to live in peace. We all need our needs met. And we need to basically not be attacking each other because we think that, each other are after the stuff that we want. To some degree, the Bitcoin at scale can help that. But there's a whole bunch of competing networks that are trying to sort of essentially getting in the way, but they aren't really going anywhere. And part of the reason for that is they're based on sharing much more than Bitcoin is, which is based on competition. And people like sharing. So those models, as much as you might want to bash Ethereum or proof of stake, they're here to stay, at least in the short term, not the long term. They will migrate in the long term. But the point is that, for now, at least, this is the world as it is. You have to accept the world as it is and work with what you've got.
There's a connection here that I want to just add, see if I comprehend. The blockchain with this knowledge that you're sharing that is being pushed out to people at Bitcoin at scale at a fraction of a cost. So all the knowledge is getting more and more connected as information gets cheaper and cheaper. And so that then is like a connection to the spiritual realm, it seems like, where you're saying that the consciousness, you become smarter and smarter, and your brains and your neurons begin to connect with the universal consciousness.
So there's something called Apophenia, which is the tendency to make connections between things. Okay, so you might take two words that have the same sound and have two different meanings, and they're essentially, they have pointers in different directions. They have different connotations. They have a different place on the conceptual map. Now, if you want to keep both of those concepts separately, you can do that, right? The problem is that it takes up twice as much space in your memory. So you need twice as much energy to move those concepts around. The natural economic thing to do is to run the two sounds together in the same direction And then you want to run the meanings together as well. And that's problematic. If you have the same sound that points in the same direction but means two different things, that's bad. So too much compression, right, in pursuit of economics is not helpful. You need just the right amount of compression. You're thinking about permutations of many, many millions or even billions of concepts, permutations of the connections of how they run together. A way of thinking about this is your brain is a library of all of the concepts in all of the world and all of time, condensed down into, a single, so it's like it's a computer basically, and it's got all of those concepts in it. They're compressed into signs and symbols. Now you're doing this computation very, very fast and all of this compression stuff so that you can think. You're doing this apophenia thing as well. You're doing the links and the backlinks.
Apophenia is
apophenia.
Is what?
Apophenia. It's the tendency to make links between things. Now, those links, actually, they're somewhat delusional, right? They're not necessarily true. What I'm really pointing out is more like conspiracy theorism, right? Where people take in a bunch of information, make a bunch of rather specious links, and they're just like, well, this means this because this actually confirms my bias about what I already want to believe, right? And you see this all the time in conspiracy theories. They put a whole bunch of junk together, and then they think that it means something bigger, and they try to explain what that thing is to you, but the thing that they're trying to explain seems to just get bigger and more nebulous and more nebulous. And it's just a big conspiracy. Yes, it is a big conspiracy. It's a conspiracy of one, in a sense. You're the conspirator. You're the one that's making sense out of things. And you either make sense concisely, in which case you can communicate that sense to other people, or you're talking bullshit, and people don't know what the hell you're talking about. Apophenia and conspiracy theorism are more or less the same thing. If you're trying to create information retrieval systems, if you're familiar with PageRank in Google, the way that it works is, PageRank was the algorithm for Google, and basically what it is it's a bibliography of bibliographies, right? So in a bibliography, you write down all of the links, the references to your concepts in your essay at the end of your essay. And when you're reading the essay, you can check the links in the bibliography and go and read the references. A website would have a bunch of backlinks to other websites. The websites would link to that. And the more backlinks they had, the higher up the search algorithm it would get. If a page is very much linked to and referred to and referenced, it's very valuable. It has a high weight. If you're looking for something on Google, you want something to be of high quality. You want to have a lot of links. But of course, it lends itself rather well to advertising. And that was Google's model, essentially, is you can pay to get to the top of the search rankings. And the affiliate marketers are like, yeah, so what we'll do is our business model will be to link to other sites that pay us in order to get them up the search rankings, SEO. Now, your brain is the same thing. When you're looking for a concept, you're looking for an answer, you're kind of querying your brain, and you want to get a whole bunch of backlinks to the most relevant thing so that you get a relevant answer to whatever question you're asking. In terms of network theory, with Bitcoin, you throw out a whole bunch of endpoints, the public keys, public addresses, and you can attach different bits of information there. And you can economically weight the information by every time it gets paid for, retrieved, and you can say this information has been paid, searched for, and retrieved this many times, and therefore it's economically weighted this much. Instead of having advertising, I mean, you would still have advertising on that model, but it's just a way of economically routing searches over the network or attaching money to the searches. So you can remodel the way that Google works on Bitcoin if you have a metanet where people are paying for things like searches or any traffic, essentially. You can think about all of the information in all of the world as the Akashic record. If you're using a computer to access that, it's all very physical. If you're using your brain and psychedelics to access that, then it's much more quote-unquote spiritual. Obviously, one is a mirror of the other. You have a mechanistic physical mirror in the world outside of you, what's happening inside, and vice versa. So there's a simulation going on there. It's a bit, you don't want to make the lines too fuzzy and talk about Bitcoin and the Akashic records. You need to actually make the conceptual jumps between, the outside and the inside psychedelics and how they all link together.